Stephen, thank you for kicking things off here. Thank you for this presentation. Great choice. I agree that the George Bernard Shaw quotes are among the best. So great job. All right, so let's go ahead and jump over to the presentation. And I've got that up right here. So you've got all the all the pieces are in place, so to speak. So you've got the wonderful bio. Good job there. Then we've got the timeline information. But great job there. I'm sure you'll condense this because there's a lot of information here. Um, this is a good idea. Great idea there. Good find, by the way, too. And then you've got the image. So this is fantastic. Um, Famous quotes. I love this. I love this. His quotes are just amazing. Right up there with Mark Twain. These are fantastic. Citations, great job. Okay, so let's jump over to the sketches, and I think that good job here. You're really showing intent, and to a high degree, I think you're understanding a lot of the visual correspondence that we're talking about here, and creating these wonderful connections between type and image. Not only image, but typography and the way that we embellish typography based on the content, so to speak. So this is really good stuff. So as we take a look at the requirements associated with this assignment, so we see all of your sketches have um, all the pieces in place. The only one I'm concerned about is this right here, and I'll talk about that in a second. I'm not real sure what that is. So and it's not described, and your sketches aren't described. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. We'll start from the top. So each of your pieces has the name on the front, and that's great. So the front has the name and the tagline. Although the tagline um, is required on the front, so as a tagline needs to be present on the front. Okay, so you don't just have the name. The tagline on the front is required. Okay, so these two would have to include some sort of a tagline. This is interesting. It's got the name and it's a quote, which does count as a tagline. So cool. So remember, we got to include the tagline along with the name on the front. Biographical information's on the back. Excellent. Timeline design. We see timelines depicted in all three examples, so that's fantastic. Also, um, ba, 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 photographic imagery on the back, and then two 11 by 17. In this situation, you've got these three sketches oriented in a landscape format. So that's fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Now, this, of course, needs a tagline, right? But I think this is interesting. If I'm reading this the way that I believe it's intended, is you've got the signature that you have up top here, that signature, and it looks like that W kind of has this stroke that keeps on going. So it looks like you're going to extend that stroke and then extend that to the back page and follow the timeline off that. Great idea, really neat stuff there. Make sure you grid this out so that everything fits together. Front and back need to. Make sure that you use a grid on the front and back. It'll really help. I promise. I'll explain more on that coming in next week. But okay, so I said I was a little concerned about this. I'm not real sure what this is. Is this a curtain? And if it is, it can't be an image, right? It can't be photographic image, as the only photographic imagery allowed in this assignment is the bio picture on the back of the poster. So I'm not sure what this is. And if it's an illustration, it should be typographic. I mean, your main communication on this piece should be typographic on the front of the poster. So unless you can work this in somehow to the typography, I'd rather you didn't use an illustration to create meaning on the front. It's better that you practice creating meaning, and I'll show you some examples typographically. Okay, so hang on one second. Sorry. Anyways, yeah, so if you look in the instructions, and the very first requirement is that there's an inclusion, and I've got it right here so you can see, but announce the person through some typographic design of their name. Okay, so that to me, I'm going to interpret that as a typographic solution using typography to create meaning, eliminating the use of any kind of a supplemental illustration to create meaning. Create your meanings typographically, okay? So that's a little bit of a concern there. Everything else is looking great. I think this is neat. This could be very, very cool, especially if his name were presented at full opacity and maybe this quote in the background is reduced or screened back so you can kind of see creating this dimensional uh, depth typographically. So and that's neat. And then you could somehow kind of try to mirror that on the back. So I'm getting ahead of myself. I think that at this point, I would say that you should just think about it. Definitely think about it. Think these through. Don't make a choice immediately. Just think it through. Think of your possibilities. Think of the ramifications. Make your final decision based on what you feel to be the most expeditious way to move forward. Which do you feel has the most potential? I guess is what I'm saying. And then move on in that direction. And I'm fine with that. But at this point, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of areas in the class itself. And the first thing I want to show you is about this right here. Go through this presentation, week 5, evocative typography, sign symbols, and semiotics, and take a look at the examples. And these are some things that you can try to employ. There's some really neat stuff going on here, and this is really a wonderful little demonstration here of how to use simultaneously a visual transformation, substitution, exaggeration, visual correspondence. And I kind of group these all into this all-encompassing term, visual correspondence. So if I do use the term visual correspondence, I'm referring to all of these. A lot of these kind of, they cross lines a little bit. So one example could fall into 2 of these, but try to include at least one of these. And these examples are great, so you can really go through this, spend some time with it, and think about how you can apply some of those techniques to your work. And do this before you decide which direction to go. And then, of course, in the announcements area, here's some other really great examples of visual correspondence. And then at that point, come down to the bottom here and take a look at these examples, which are these examples are really great. And of course, yes, visual correspondence. Note that's an illustration, but it's used typographically, so it's perfectly acceptable here. And then, of course, it's followed through onto the back of the poster to create the timeline. This one's a little different in that the pattern in the M is not defined yet. And then we get to the back and we go, okay, there it is. So it creates this kind of aha moment, which is really neat and impactful too. And then, of course, this one is fantastic because this is visual correspondence at its finest. So Martin Luther King, the E, it's an equal sign, but it's substitution. We read it as Martin Luther King. The equal sign fits right here beautifully, equality. And then the designer elected to use that to create the timeline. So you can really see these wonderful relationships here. And that's what I would like you to think about. To a high degree, I think that's going to determine the success of this poster, is your ability to apply visual correspondence to the work. Okay, great job. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. Thanks very much. Oh, as far as your final submission for this week, just go ahead and make sure that you create sketches that adhere to the project requirements, and then you can really start comparing apples to apples. All right, great job. Thank you very much.